health, and I feel like probably over these last couple of weeks is when I've probably started feeling my best. Obviously, my ankle kind of didn't allow me to really see.
The events within the Team USA program caught everyone in the basketball world off guard. A head coach disappeared from the sidelines halfway through the competition without offering a convincing public explanation. Caitlin Clark went from being a bench player to the primary driver of the offense in a matter of hours when a new voice took over almost overnight. Fans immediately took note. The internet went bananas once the interim coach at the center of it all revealed exactly what had happened and what this staff had been doing to Clark behind closed doors. They wished to keep the whole story a secret. To understand why it struck so profoundly, you have to go back to the beginning of this moment. During a training camp in Durham, North Carolina, in December, Caitlin Clark first put on her trainers as a member of the USA basketball women's senior national team. This wasn't just your average workout. In the red, white, and blue, it was the first obvious sign of her fate. The head coach, Cara Lawson, was just formally selected to manage the program through the 2028 Olympics in Los Angeles. Her assistants included head coaches Stephanie White of the Indiana Fever, Natalie Nasi of the Golden State Volley, and Nate Tibbetts of the Phoenix Mercury. On paper, a heavy bench. In actuality, this arrangement would quietly result in one of the qualifying run's most talked about narratives. Behind closed doors, Clark was doing everything right at that camp in December. She was working with medical staff, working with development coaches, and rebuilding her body following a disastrous 2025 WNBA season in which she played in just 13 games due to a string of lower body injuries that kept one of the most explosive players in the sport from playing basketball for nearly a full year. She had missed the WNBA All-Star Game. She had failed to make the playoffs. She had watched from the sidelines while the Indiana Fever made significant postseason progress without her. However, when the cameras rolled at that Durham camp, Clark seemed to be herself again, focused, energized, and ready. The cameras were unable to adequately portray the concern that was gradually building over how she might be used once the game began. Puerto Rico won the FIA Women's World Cup qualifying round in March 2026. Team USA had already earned a spot in the World Cup in Germany after winning the American Cup the summer before. These 5 qualifying matches in San Juan were therefore just formalities. Despite the formalities, Paige Buchers, Angel Reese, and Caitlin Clark were making their senior national team debuts, thus the stakes looked quite high. Together, 3 of the most prominent women's basketball players are making their international debut. There were a ton of admirers present. Lawson's usage of her new generation of stars on social media was being watched by the whole basketball world. The events of the first 2 games utterly shocked everyone. Lawson came with an attitude that she openly described as a fact-finding trip. She was heavily rotating all 12 players on the roster, utilizing a system where 5 players departed and 5 returned on a schedule that was essentially mechanical, similar to hockey shifts. Clark was placed in the second unit rather than the starting 5. Monique Billings, Ryan Howard, Kelsey Plum, and Kiki Iriafin were all on the bench with her. Chelsea Gray, Jackie Young, Kalia Copper, Durka Kahambi, and a rotating frontcourt were the season's starting lineup, and they remained that way game after game. The optics instantly created questions. Clark, for her part, handled it with the composure of someone who had done this before. In the opening game versus Senegal, she came off the bench and performed admirably. International records were broken by the USA's opening effort with 17 points and 12 assists. She set the attacking tone for the entire team in only 1 quarter. After the event, Lawson acknowledged it, praising Clark as one of the most dynamic playmakers in the world and praising how she immediately accelerated the pace and impact of everything around her. Despite this, Clark remained in the second unit. For the second game against Puerto Rico, the rotation-heavy strategy was kept. Clark scored 12 points and dished out 5 assists in a resounding victory. The numbers were remarkable. The effect was undeniable. The surrounding construction, however, did not change. Supporters were agitated. On social media, it was boiling over. People began asking the same question over and over. Why? Despite being the most explosive player on the court, Clark was not allowed to start or fully utilize the attacking strategy. Then the coach left. At this moment, the story takes an unexpectedly dramatic turn. Lawson had always planned to return to Duke. Her dual responsibilities of guiding the Blue Devils in the NCAA tournament had drawn criticism even before the qualification tournament started. When Lawson had to return due to Duke's schedule, Nate Tibbetts, the head coach of the Phoenix Mercury, took over during the last games. The transition was portrayed in a deliberate and official manner. But what happened in court thereafter told a completely different story. Almost immediately as Tibbetts joined the meeting, the philosophy was altered. The rigid 5-in, 5-out rotation is no longer in use. The fixed hierarchy that maintained the same veterans in the starting 5 was no longer in place, regardless of what the lineup combinations were truly producing. Something that was far more like merit-based basketball took its place. And Caitlin Clark was the first to benefit. In the game against Italy, Team USA's first 5 players had immediate difficulties. After 3 minutes, the offense had completely stagnated. Italy had dared the Americans to beat them, barred passing lanes, and packed the paint. The first unit could not shatter it. Then, looking along the bench, Tibbetts called number 22. At 6:46 of the first quarter, Clark entered the game. What happened was characterized by viewers in real time as nothing less than a coup. Under Clark's direction, Team USA scored 23 points in just 6.5 minutes. To put it in context, the starters had scored 5 points in the 3 minutes before her. Clark is not just favored by the maths, but her name is called out. The court's geometry altered as soon as she touched the ball. Italy's defense was relaxed and calm before her arrival, but now they were racing to cover unexpected ground. Clark finished the game with 12 points and 5 assists, contributing to Team USA's 93-59 victory. But this is what made Tibbetts unique, and both supporters and commentators accepted it right away. In addition to making the lineup changes, he spoke candidly about them, which is actually unusual for coaches in professional environments where every public statement is closely examined. Standing at the platform, Tibbetts acknowledged that the previous approach had not been the greatest. He made it clear that the team's best playmakers should be the center of the offense, even though he refrained from directly criticizing Lawson. He emphasized that the group produced its finest performance. When there was clarity, players knew their roles, and the offensive system was created to maximize the team's greatest players rather than distribute minutes equitably. The media acknowledged the significance of what he was saying. This was essentially a coach confirming what the box scores had been showing for days, that the system in place before Clark's arrival had not unlocked his powers. He didn't yell it. It made news even though he didn't make it into an article. A match against New Zealand marked the start of the next chapter. This time, Tibbetts started Clark. For the first time in the competition, she was out there from tip-off alongside Chelsea Gray, Kelsey Plum, Monique Billings, and Dirk Kahambi. The result was exactly what proponents of this reform had expected. New Zealand was crushed by Team USA. In just 23 minutes, Clark orchestrated from the top of the key with assurance and control, scoring 14 points on efficient shooting, making perfect free throws, and dishing out a team-high 6 assists. The offense moved forward faster. Players that were free were found by the ball. The spacing was just what was needed. For the first time in the competition, Clark seemed completely comfortable in a role that was authentic to her skills. It was so different from the first 2 games that even casual viewers noticed. It was more than just changing the lineup. This team made a statement about what it could become when it stopped being reluctant to give its best players total freedom. It didn't end there. Later in the competition, Tibbetts produced another move that went viral on social media. He put Clark and Paige Bookers on the back court. Supporters of Perion had been conjecturing for months that 2 of the most gifted playmakers of their generation may collaborate. Both of them can shoot from 30 feet away, create from wherever, and spot passes that most players would never even contemplate. The result was an attacking clinic. When the 2 are on the court together, defense becomes nearly impossible. There are open shooters on every possession. Driving lanes open by themselves. The paint becomes accessible in ways that it simply isn't when the offensive scheme is built around less dynamic ball handlers. It was the kind of one-time court testimony that offers definitive answers to queries through results rather than debate. Furthermore, Tibbetts did not see the coupling as a curiosity but rather as a legitimate weapon. Now, it's important to be clear about something that could be missed in the flurry of fan outrage and social media rumors. Kara Lawson's original plan had no plot against Caitlin Clark. Lawson has consistently stated that information gathering was the goal of these qualifying games. In order to prepare for the 2028 Olympics and World Cup in Berlin, her objective was to evaluate several combinations, identify which players complemented particular groupings, and establish the foundation for what Team USA will look like. Arriving without any regular games after their different WNBA off-season seasons. Rotating everyone and seeing how the parts fit together makes logic. Actually, it's how you create software in a responsible manner over time. Lawson constantly commended Clark and showed that she understood the kind of player she was working with, even as she moved Clark throughout the second unit. On the ground, though, the results presented an interesting story. And Tibbetts acted in a short period of time with less need for assessment and more need for triumph, making the choice that the data suggested. At the center of this whole situation is that dispute. Clark was given less independence than she deserved under one of the two reputable coaching approaches. A plot that was almost as long as the games themselves emerged from the fan reaction to all of this. When Lawson first kept Clark in the second unit, social media erupted with concerns that the coaching staff was deliberately limiting his impact, either out of jealousy, favoritism for veterans, or an internal power struggle that no one was properly addressing in public. As pictures of Clark standing near her Indiana Fever head coach, Stephanie White, who was assisting Team USA, went viral, fans examined her body language and facial expressions frame by frame. The audience was positive they could see a hint of tension in such conversations. Comments flooded in, suggesting that White and Clark's time together with the Fever had left them with unresolved difficulties. Some Clark backers were reportedly incensed when White publicly defined Kelsey Mitchell as the team's #1 offensive priority. The perception was real, but it is impossible to verify from the outside whether any of that had anything to do with what was happening on the Puerto Rican court. Furthermore, for those who are already